Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the We Can Do Better conversations. Today, we're going to be talking about acceptance, a foundational piece to self-love, how we show up in the world, to how we lead effectively, and to how we create better. And I'm privileged today to have with us as guests Mila DeChant, Enrique Acosta, and Hass Sadeghi to talk about this topic, enrich and expand the conversation around acceptance using or tapping into our unique experiences and stories. And we encourage you, as you listen to this, and to comment and to enrich and expand the conversation upon listening to it. And so with that, let's get started with this discussion of acceptance. And let's start with as regards to self, right? In terms of how do we best show up as ourselves in the world, and what role does acceptance play in that? And so, Hass, let me have you get us started.
Yeah, I was really much, when I heard the word acceptance, for me, it resonated with an inner state of being, not so much in action. And the first inspiration quote that came to mind is the one that I really love, is Herman Hesse's "Strength isn't holding on, it's letting go." And I sensed, for me, my journey as a leader, very much the undertones were letting go of this conditioned who I was, and in order to actually accept who I am. So it was an allowing. Synonymous to acceptance for me is allowing or surrender. So I had to really surrender into the fullness of myself. And I'm always reminded of energetics. They say that which you resist persists. So I was very much in resistance most of my life for 30, I'd say 35, even to last year, really, when it clicked for me. And once that inner acceptance happened, I found that extended outside of me, and it became easier to accept others, to be more tolerant, to be more understanding, to really embody that notion of we're all one in terms of being in that clear space within. There was no distortion outside of me. So I would start there.
Thank you, Hass. Love your language, right? So allowing, surrendering to the fullness of into the fullness of yourself. Energetics, energy plays a huge part of it, right? So love where you're starting to direct us and point us in terms, or invite us to kind of explore. And so, Enrique, thoughts around acceptance?
Yeah, just listening to Haas, and I was thinking while he was talking, acceptance is really a revelation of yourself. That revelation has to be clear in order for you to accept yourself. That is why we battle so much with ourselves. That's why they say your worst critic is you. And once you come to that realization of who you are, then you can compartmentalize and divide among the people that you come across every day. I'll give you an example. We talked earlier, just in introductions, about when we got to that point. 2 years ago, I got to that point. Now, I thought I had it all in the bag all these years. Figure that. But 2 years ago, I came to the realization of myself. And then when I dealt with myself, that I could accept who I was, but that was tied to a bigger than me. And when I tied to something bigger than me, I was able to understand why those struggles. And then I was able to let go. I'll let go and then accept the real me, because unfortunately we're raised and conditioned to be something outside of who we actually are. And so when we let go of those conditions and those, habitual training of humans, we really get to know who we are, and we really get to accept who we are. And that's when we really start making a difference.
Love that, Enrique. Thank you for that. Mila.
So I absolutely loved what Hass and Enrique shared, right? I love to Hass points about the tolerance piece and the conditioning piece. Enrique, you touched on the revelation of the self. That's such a huge piece. To me, acceptance, I had to relearn what acceptance looked like to me. I had to remind myself what acceptance looked like again to me. When we are toddlers or children or a child, right? Just going back to, like, how did young Brian look like? How did young Hass look like? How did the 1-year-old Enrique look like? Let's not picture about the diapers, but how did we really look like, right? From that stance. I recall being such a bubbly child, like such a creative child. I took on whatever I wanted to do. My parents were like, yeah, Mila, you can do whatever you set out to do. And then came the conditioning, as Hass mentioned, right? I started letting go of who I truly am and was becoming when I started hearing my teachers saying, you're stupid. Because I experienced abuse as a child by my teachers, right? And that abuse kind of eliminated my identity, my independent thinking, my independent speaking, right? Like, I do not know what I'm going to think, but the universe is such a powerful way to remind us. But when we have a medium, and that medium can be in the form of a person, a number of people, a number of people's opinions, the environment, that contributes to how we see ourselves. That destroys how we accept ourselves. In order to move forward to accept ourselves, we have to dig deeper into what are we struggling with, as to the point of Hass and Enrique. And again, it's like I got reminded of who Mila is when I was on top of that building ready to jump off. And I had all those flashbacks as to a child, Mila as a child, bubbly soul, and this child who got abused by my teacher, and this adult who stood on top of the building, listening to other people's insecurity that affected my belief as to who I am, contorted the way I looked at acceptance. It's about accepting myself, eliminating the conditioned words, the conditioned environments, the insecurity of others. So acceptance is about digging deeper and reiterating to ourselves that this is my identity, this is my individuality, I'm weird. You accept it. If you don't accept it, I have to accept myself. I am the moustache dancer. Brian loves to dance. Enrique, you like to dance too, I'm assuming. So we have to embrace our own weirdness. That is what acceptance is about for me.
Love that, Mila, and all of you all. And, you guys made me think about this notion of, it's not like you just go out and you just pick up some acceptance at the store. Now you're good to go, right? Now you got it. You pick up a book, or we all have had our own versions of our stories with this. Yeah. And it's a lot of work. We talk about the inner work, and Mila was kind of pointing us to that. It's like, we've all got our stuff, and we've got influencers early in life, right? We're dependent, totally dependent when we come into this world. And then we have our influencers, the people that care for us, who do the best they can. And others, as teachers, like Mila was talking about, that come in and they affect us, how we think about ourselves, how we look at ourselves. And that's something for us all to be mindful of as influencers now, as adults, is how we affecting others. And that gets back into the leadership piece, but with the self piece and going deeper, as Mila was pointing us to, and you've all kind of been pointing us to, it's a journey, right? It's like, hey, wait a minute, it's checking in with ourselves. How am I talking to myself? How am I engaging with myself energetically? Am I honoring a request that I know internally I may not want to say yes to, but I don't say no because I don't want to hurt the other person, where I'm doing a disservice in that to both the other person because I'm not being upfront and honest, even under the pretense of wanting not to hurt them. And I'm not really honoring myself because I'm still devoting some sort of energy to it because it's just lingering in the back mind. And so all this gets to sort of acceptance and honoring self, and this journey we're on to understand self. Constant journey to kind of learn about ourselves, get clarity about what matters to us. And so on this journey of acceptance and self-acceptance, what kind of, and you talked about, Enrique, the last 2 years coming to kind of a connection there for you that opened things up. So what is that for each of us, right? So we'll kind of just touch on that for a second. What is it that helped us see acceptance differently and then become it?
Yeah, if I can, real quick, 2 or 3 things that have come in based on what Mila said, what you said, and what Enrico has said. There's 2 pieces of research that I stumbled upon, and they're becoming more prominent. One is the ACE study, an adverse children experiences study done by Kaiser, which has shown now that most chronic degenerative, most dis-ease, imbalance in the homeostasis of the body or the biofield is actually caused by early childhood trauma. And now trauma is a misunderstood word. Trauma can be anything from what my brother experienced in the legal system and having really heinous litigation and, you know, vampiric lawyers, or something like what Mila and I experienced, being sensitive children that then were exposed to, I guess you could say, abusive teachers that didn't know any better. And a lot of what I stumbled upon is hurt people hurt people. And so a lot of what, for me, I was carrying was this wounded inner child, not to get into too much of the Jungian neo-shamanism piece. And that inner child work really goes to a second piece that I stumbled upon, Dr. Aron, A-R-O-N, highly sensitive people. And I don't like labels. I call it extrasensory. She's basically found and stumbled upon in every species, 20% has extrasensory or sensitive abilities. And that's genetically and evolutionarily to push the species forward. So I would guess that all of us, for the most part, have that trait, and that ties to the inner child piece. So I had to really accept my hurt, the hurt inner child that was unintegrated. I had to then accept that, okay, I'm sensitive. And for a Persian man being, you know, in an alpha lawyer, you know, dominated, you know, culture, it was hard conditioning to get past. And once I stepped into the hurt, felt it, again, you have to feel it, as Enrico mentioned, as Brian's alluded to, and I sense Mila has gone through something similar, that then releases the energy and then embrace and accept the sensitivity that I carried. I mean, for me, it really all then started to gel as to what's going on with many of our leaders, because this is now showing up in the data and the research and the health studies that we have ignored that base level of our humanity, which, you know, they call the inner child is one piece of it. So that for me is, you know, I kind of was feeling into it, and then you asked the question, and that happened to synchronistically be where I was at with it. So I wanted to hear also Enrico how he dealt with it, because he said dealt with it, and that core piece I sense we all kind of got to by dealing with it or processing through it.
Yeah, it's funny when I say deal with it. It was really I gave way to what I was realizing, and so I remember having a conversation with my wife. I said, you know, and this was as this process was going, and it's funny because I literally felt like I was gonna die 3 times during that whole time. The anxiety and the pressure of all that was being revealed to me as I was going through this period it was overwhelming. It was almost a revelation of who you have been, Enrique, based on all your life and who you really are. And I literally felt like I was in the Matrix. Busting out of this cocoon and pulling wires out of me. It was that painful. It was really painful, because can you imagine living all your life under this assumed identity, all to find out that it's been all a lie, both from your perspective and from the perspective of others. It really tore me up. And I remember telling my wife after this whole thing played out, the man you're seeing right now, this world has not seen since I was 4 years old.
Amen.
You know, and almost get emotional, right? Because in order to get to the point that I am here today, I had to accept all that falsehood every step of the way. And the way my thing came was that something would be revealed to me. I would be like, oh my goodness. I would have to reveal that to my wife. That, talk about
double the work.
Talk about double pain. But what it created was, like I said, almost a clean slate. I became that 4-year-old again prior to all the effects, and my wife got a brand new husband, a brand new husband that and a brand new world. And it's been amazing, but I had to accept first who I was, then who I thought I was, and then who I really was.
I wanted to applaud you, Enrique. Really, when I say applaud you, I'm celebrating you for the vulnerability, right? And Hass, you mentioned about the trauma piece. I want to tell trauma lives within our body, right? And it shows up in any way. Enrique, you mentioned about anxiety, the anxiety that you felt, the pressure that you felt. I felt that, you know, when my teacher was slapping me every day, pulling my hair and slamming my head against the wall, calling me stupid every single day, right? And that image re-emerged again when my manager was saying, you stupid foreigner, you can't speak English, you're not worthy to be in this society. That's what I had for 2.5 years from my manager every single day. And if I questioned, right, it came in the form of retaliation. I didn't know how she was going to retaliate, but my body couldn't take it anymore. And you mentioned about anxiety and pressure. I had pain that I didn't know where the pain was coming from. I have a benign tumor right here during that whole, I don't know if you can see, that's how my body reacted. I had chronic migraines. I couldn't make the pain go away. I wanted the pain to go away. I wanted so badly for everything to end. Right, but you mentioned, Enrique, that moment, that realization moment was what I experienced as well. Like, no, I have to overcome all of this BS. It was almost like Enrique, you mentioned like the Matrix. I've never watched the Matrix, but I've seen like bits and pieces of that advertisement. I do know that they go like backwards and whatnot, but that's exactly how I felt. I was like dodging bullets and whatnot in order to like remind myself, hey Mila, you're flexible. You have to accept what has happened. You have to keep peace. When I say keep peace, show peace, embrace peace, and keep the peace within you. I had to forgive people who, after going through a hate process, I hated them. I was so angry of myself, of them. I had to it took me 18 months to heal. It took me 18 months to heal. I was ashamed. I had to embrace my shame. I had to accept my shame. I had to accept how it was framed. I had to accept how my character was defamed. I had to accept this is what I am undergoing. I had to accept in order to move forward. I have to let it go, like a snake shedding its skin. And when I became, I was like, hey, I'm back. I said it out loud last year in October. I am back. And I remember speaking with someone and saying, I'm back. And they were like, what do you mean you're back? It's like, I'm back. And that's when my husband was like, you are a different Mila. Like the trauma, people's opinions, contorts the way that we are, our identity, what we believe. It prevents us from accepting ourselves. And I applaud Enrique, I applaud Hass too for being vulnerable and sharing everything.
Can I build on that if that's okay, Brian? Yeah, thank you for the sentiment, and you almost made me tear up, Enrique. So if you tear up and I tear up, I have my shawl for coughing, so I'll have to wipe my eyes. I tear up and everything. I'm like the American Beauty guy. I see a bag blowing in the wind now, and I start crying.
Just so you guys know, we're not suppressing any emotions here, so feel free, bud.
Well, my topic is really what came through was, I had to accept my humanness, and what really in a meat suit we forget, and that it's woo-woo for some, and for me, I had the luxury of being pre-medicine, having 2 older siblings that are doctors, and seeing integrative medicine, and we forget that energy is everything, and a lot of this is simply energy on top of energy on top of energy. And like Mila, I had necrosis, which is where your body actually starts eating itself at the peak of my burnout. So it was very telling, because I didn't want to accept my humanness. I didn't want to accept the meat suit. And then the other piece that came forth, what Enrique said, and I've had to be careful of this in the work that I do because I bring forth such powerful transformations, is the capacity, the actual ability to allow these energies to come up, and not to get too mystical. Many people think Yeshua ben Yosef, otherwise known as Christ, resurrected body-wise. My interpretation is he resurrected his consciousness and really rebirthed himself as an energetic awareness. And that's, for a lot of people, that's daunting. And I sense that's why a lot of leaders at a subconscious level don't, stay on the fringe of the deep core work we're talking about, this deep acceptance. Because I had, to give you an example, I was dealing with a healer and a teacher friend, and she's in her 80s, very powerful woman, has studied therapy and healing arts. And she did this process called voice dialogue by Hal Stone. So it's basically you interact with your subconscious. I had 6 archetypes between me and my rage. In other words, she said, Hass, look at this room energetically, because she kept moving me. Here's one archetype. And I was like, oh, wow. I was so disassociated, so unaccepting of my angst, of my rage, all these energies that had accumulated, that even I, with my capacity, which people say I'm very energetic, it was daunting. So I have had to accept compassion, because what Enrique said was, it's a very real thing that all of this comes up, and it's worse than the dark night of the soul. It can literally kill some people if you do it too quickly, if you rush it, if so. It's acceptance of that humanness is what it's really reminded me of, is that we all have our process and we need to honor it, and we have to really honor our body, our physical vessels.
Love that. Love that. And you're helping me see now the connection between acceptance and being connected or disconnected. And so my story is of disconnection. And throughout my life, there's pockets where, like you're talking about the 4-year-old you, right? Well, the 4-year-old me would show up when I was being me, but that was sometimes. It wasn't all the time, because the energy layers, or the limiting belief layers, if we want to call them those, start to layer on top, right? Through school, like Mila's teacher, right? Kind of creating some situations, because the experience for a child is, you're learning, you're kind of, oh, am I supposed to, am I really, whatever somebody's telling me that I am? All these things that we, because the subconscious mind cannot discern between true or false, it just absorbs, right? And so as we're growing and developing our mind in early childhood, we don't know the difference. So that maybe I am this, maybe I am that. And it's like, and we start being disconnected from ourselves. And so until we get to the point, whether it's, for me, the biggest change happened for me like 7 years ago, right? So it's not like, oh yeah, you get through childhood and then you figure it out when you're in the 20s, right? There's like this time that everybody does at the same time for everybody. It's like, no, everybody's got their own different situation, different stories. And so for me, reframing my relationship with vulnerability helped me shift everything, because it affected how I looked at myself, what I thought about myself, and how I showed up. And so understanding that, that guy showed up throughout my life in certain pockets, particularly where I felt like I belonged, and like I felt valued and heard and loved and seen and all those things. But now I get the clarity, because I've started to accept myself and connect with myself. I know who I am. I know who I'm not. It's still a journey of learning and discovery. It's not like now I figured it out because I've just reframed my relationship with vulnerability. I know a lot more now. I know who I am in terms of the being piece and the acceptance piece. And it's more about, like you're talking about, the acceptance of both who I may not be and who I am, right? Because nobody's perfect, right? I've got flaws. I've got things that I'm really good at contributing in terms of to myself and then also with others. And so I think this notion of acceptance with ourselves is so foundational to how do we lead effectively if we don't have self-acceptance and we don't then understand that, hey, everybody's on their own journey and we're all on a spectrum of anything you can talk about in terms of our journey, communication, learning, everything. It's new for somebody, right? Everything we may know is going to be new for somebody else. And so, which is interesting because human nature is we look through our own lens, right? So if I know neuroscience and Hass is just starting out with it, I might have the mindset of, oh, he should know that stuff. I know it, so he should know it, or Enrique should know it, or Mila should know it, no matter what the topic is. And it's not even necessarily like an intentional thing, but it's just like sort of a mindset of sometimes we forget that they may be on a different journey in terms of whatever the topic is. And so as leaders, I think acceptance is both for self, and then also as we get to a foundational element of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, the role acceptance plays in order to expand what like me looks like. Like me is human. We've just like siphoned it off into different components of human, right? Gender, ethnicity. We have one race, the human race, right? And so acceptance is in terms of, we talk about inclusion in the workplace and diversity, belonging, equity. Let's talk a little bit about, as we kind of maybe shift a little bit from self and the foundation of self to how do we lead effectively, both ourselves and others, the critical role that acceptance plays in that.
I'll go, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, what came forward, and it was an interesting segue for me too, because you said the word disconnect, and I used disassociation, and I learned from a guy, Greg Ward, who's in Southern California too. He does a lot of Vistage speaking, and he did a presentation on embodied presence as a leader. And so to shift that from the self real quick, we have to accept all parts of ourselves and actually come back to the body. And there's a corollary for me outside because of what you said, Brian. It's true. The definition is a fragmentation of the whole. And that fragmentation, let's say in the ecosystem, I fragment the men and the women. So I'm splicing the energies of the whole system. And in that way, separating and not allowing people to accept their wholeness and to bring that belonging, which I love Mila's illustration that she posted where acceptance is here and then you have belonging. It doesn't allow for that because there's no wholeness in the space. And I sense as far as the inclusion piece, that's where we all need to start as leaders is after you do the self-work is to then say, okay, where in the ecosystem, where in the organization, where in the nonprofit, what have you, where are we splicing the energies? Where are we not allowing space or connection? Really, connection is simply energy allowing to interact. Well, if you split, you can't interact. And that's where I find it very tautological and funny to me because we have a lot of people now splicing the splicing. Now, now it's like a definition of the definitions that we've made. And all we're doing is we're adding more layers when the essence of it is let's come back to the wholeness in our ecosystem. Let's start to see commonalities, which is when I do facilitation work is where are the common nodes? Where can I bring the team together on common nodes? Because that then goes, oh, okay, we're all one, and they start to accept their wholeness as a team.
I love what, if I may add to that, I love what you just said, Hass, like adding wholeness to the team, right? I think most of the time we all have blind spots, and leaders especially tend to have blind spots as to not seeing how the whole looks like, right? Rather, they look at the whole, like HOL, where are the holes, as opposed to the wholesome of it. And this is, I want to say a challenge, a huge challenge, right? Because there are two sides of acceptance before we can even climb up. I'm not going to say the ladder, but climb up the mountain in a way where there are roads around the mountain with a true two-way traffic. Because when you have a one-way ladder, only one person can go up and down at one time. So when we embrace it from that perspective, right, as to how do we build from a space where our blind spots are open and our blind spots are eliminated in a way where conscious discrimination is not present, right? Hass, Enrique, and Brighton, you mentioned about, in order to move forward, we have to embrace the self. We have to look into tolerance. We have to deal with the self. And when leaders look into themselves, they also have to look at the other side of the coin as to, all right, this is how I want to be accepted. And I have to look at how they want to be accepted, right? Regardless of the race, regardless of their age, regardless of which bus stop that they are, alighting or boarding the bus from, regardless whether they failed, regardless of whatever the situation that they are coming from, let me embrace. Let me break the gate. There's no such thing as gatekeeping. Let me break the gate. Let me push all the walls. There's no building walls. Let's break the walls and embrace people. Even when we disagree, let's embrace people, because disagreements make us stronger. Disagreements challenges our own stereotypes. It challenges our own plateau, right? Like when leaders say, oh, I know everything. I've got 25 years of bloody experience. Like, keep that bloody experience to yourself. That's why you need people who are different from each other, right? Just because I'm disagreeing with you, just because I disagree with you and I'm not speaking to you for 2 weeks, does not mean I hate you. It means I'm digesting. It means that my ego has been hurt. It means I am still assimilating it, but I'll come back and speak with you. That's an important piece people are missing. And mostly is look at it as a whole. You disagree with me, you're not speaking to me. They don't understand the space that consists within acceptance in order to move to the next level as to belonging. Belonging as to, don't create a space where people conform. Create a space where people will confirm who they are. People will confirm that let's grow together. So that's a huge missing piece.
Real quick, I'm sorry, Enrique. Real quick, if I may.
Go ahead.
It's interesting what you said, because I found that as I became more gentle on myself, I became more gentle with others. And that, for instance, I honor the introverts out there that need the space to process. So what I always say, when people call it empathy, I'm simply enhancing my awareness, energetic awareness to the whole, is, hey, tell me where you're at. And I had to get more gentle and aware within, or more accepting of that, to be able to do that. So I think it's also a very missing piece in the workspaces, that there's no gentility on the self, let alone with others. Sorry, Enrique, I didn't mean to.
No problem. I was just gonna comment on the difference between experience, and you say, yeah, keep your bloody experience. There's a lot of people confuse experience for exposure. Because they've been exposed to the information. They don't have experience, because experience gives you what we're talking about right now. When you really experience something, it changes you from the inside out. I remember this one time, and it's actually my last corporate job. Day one, I get there. This is the very first day. I asked my field manager to come in the office. He was the one below me. I tell him, hi, I'm Enrique. I'm newly hired manager here. You have 1 year to learn everything I know and replace me. You saw Hass, his eyes went like this, like, okay, what is this? I said, it does me no good to be the leader here if you can't replace me. And And I've written about this before, and you know, I was experiencing what Mila was saying, anxiety at this particular work site, to the point where I could not reach my hand to open the door to go into the work site. So he actually replaced me in 7 months. I did a good job. But the whole premise was that I already knew who I was, and I had accepted who I was, allowing for that experience, that true experience, to flood over into feeding someone the opportunity that they've always wanted. And instead of boasting about, and I said it was experience and exposure, instead of boasting about exposure, I actually made the realization of my acceptance into his, and he was able to then realize that, oh, someone is actually on my side. And he's doing it right now. He's doing it right now. So I'm so happy for him. But the difference between experience and exposure, and a lot of people will gloat about the exposure and label it experience, but it isn't. But that's also an area why a lot of leaders cannot accept themselves, and nor will they in turn accept others. It's impossible. But it's a common thing to the point where it has become the truth.
Just to add one more, that kind of like make me really passionate. Enrique, you mentioned to someone that, you know, you have 1 year to replace me, right? And Hass's eyes went,
Yeah.
But I feel like that's hardship, right? That you're coming from the heart. You want to enable someone else. You are not insecure. You don't have a gate to gatekeep your heart, to gatekeep whom you are. You are secure. You don't have the fears, right? And that is such an important piece that a lot of leaders are missing, right? They feel like, oh, me. I am I don't know. Every time I talk about this, it's like the caveman image comes like with a wooden bat and whatnot. But no, you're not the person who's going to go hit a rabbit. Hey, here's meat. Let's eat this. No. But instead, it's about, how can I bring food for you? Do you have gluten allergies? Do you have dairy allergies? Like, how can I enable you? And that's what you did beautifully, right? And a lot of people get so insecure and like, let's draw the gates, let's lock it up. It's like, no, replace yourself. So you are giving yourself the opportunities, like, how can I learn and elevate myself? To Brian's point earlier, like, we are all evolving, and we should and must accept that, okay, I'm not good enough, but I'm learning. We are evolving. So I wanted to just highlight that. That's an important piece for leaders. Like, replace me for me to go learn.
Now she got me passionate off of her passion, off of his passion. Real quick, I mean, what's interesting is, again, you know, not to get too esoteric, on a very pragmatic sense, is when we accept, we bring all of our energetic awareness back on, you know, as I said earlier, the soul. So we're full, we're filled with fullness. And I love what you did, Enrico, because you said feeding somebody. So what I heard was, you fed from your fullness. You know, Don Miguel Ruiz has a really good quote. You can't be like a beggar asking for pittances of love when you have the buffet within you. Once you hit the buffet and you're, you know, in Vegas eating your winged lobster, then you are able to feed, as my interpretation, this acceptance to this quote unquote underling. And that's beautiful, because that's what Mila, you know, inspired me on, is only when we achieve our own acceptance and fulfillment can we then inspire it, because the team is an energetic extension of us, where we lead. And so that's where I think, again, back to leadership, you can't, you know, fill your tank, the tank of others, if you're not filled. And likewise, you offered acceptance. That's a beautiful gift, to feed somebody that empowered acceptance to then step in.
Thank you all, in terms of what we're evolving this conversation into. And so what's coming up for me is, so acceptance is expansive, right? it's a constant, Mila talked about learning. It's curiosity, right? It's, what can I learn today? Oh, someone new. I haven't met somebody from Sri Lanka or from Brazil or from Texas. They may talk differently in Texas than they do from New York, where I'm from, or they may have different customs. What if I just got curious about that? What does that do? It expands my learning. It fulfills me, because now, wow, I'm richer now, because now I understand human from a different level. Whether it's within the United States or within, the Latin America, wherever, globally, we start to see, wait a minute, we're more alike than unlike, Maya Angelou, right? And so this whole idea of expansion, right? Expansion of self is this whole notion of continuous learning and education. Fulfills, fuels, enriches the self. From that place, as Hass was pointing us to, and Enrique, all of you all were pointing us to, that's the place from which we can lead effectively, continue to be the leader that we all would have liked to have had, or maybe we have had if we've been fortunate, that looks at it and gets curious and invites, hey, Mila, what are your thoughts? Hey, we're approaching, this important project. I know you've had, either experience with the customers, back to experience versus exposure. I love that distinction, by the way, Enrique. Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, I read this book. Now I'm an expert on neuroscience. Really?
Good luck.
Good luck. And it's the same thing, right? You can say, yeah, have a conversation with your field manager and say, yeah, our goal for you is in a year to have you become my role. And okay, that's great, but unless you get to the point of how are we going to co-create the experiences so you're prepared to do it, it's different. And so that distinction of experience versus exposure is important. And I'll take it a step further. Is experience just particular amount of years or months in a job or in a role? Or do we count life experience and how we may have built certain tools and skills that would be valuable in the job there too? I think this expansive nature of acceptance invites a holistic conversation about what someone brings to an opportunity to serve.
Well, I say experience is the information or the exposure that changed you. If that exposure changes you, you have experience.
It's interesting that you say that. So I was going somewhere and then you took me somewhere else. I'm a word geek. The etymology or root origin of the word experience is experii, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Latin to actually apply knowledge in an experimental nature to gain the wisdom. And the first thing that Brian was saying that inspired me, in the sense that quantum physically, expansion or allness, God state, whatever you want to call it, is simply expanding out your energetic field, or what we call awareness or energetic awareness. So if you couple the two, with what you said, it's very much the actual exposure in the field to the data, to whatever's happening, as Brian calls it, to the dance. You're actually dancing in that space that then expands you, and you gain that exposure and that wisdom from an energetic perspective.
I love that you mentioned like the dance. I'm a huge fan of dancing. So, but my dad has always spoken about experience, and he passed away, but when he was alive, he would always tell me, go to different places, learn about different countries, live in that country, immerse yourself. If you do not immerse yourself, you will never be exposed, you will never gain the experience through interacting. And that is so transferable to Enrique's point, exposure, right? That is so transferable to the workplace, to the homes, to the communities on a larger scale when we are living in a melting pot. And Brian, you mentioned about getting to know people from different countries, and I always get asked by people where are you really from? No, when they see me, they're oh, India, Pakistan, and then when they hear me speak, it's oh, Brit, and then they're no, where are you really from? Where are your ancestors from? It's I don't care where my ancestors are from. I accept where I'm from, which is my mom's womb. That's where life was born. I don't know how I experienced the womb, I do not know, but the journey, right? The journey of how I immersed, how I got exposed, how I listened to someone else the way that they want to be accepted, allowed me to accept the way they are, allowed me to accept how I am listening and changing my mindset. I think there are so many moving parts to it as to how, when we take back, right, 10 steps back, as to how do we see us. It's like a floating angel, going back to Hass's energetic field. Like, if I can float, I'm seeing Mila sitting here. Oh, she's speaking with 3 different people. And then when I go farther, I can see everyone else. How can I see things from a bird's eye view, from a perspective of observation, active viewing, active listening, active assimilation? So that's how all of you like kind of like propelled me with my passion now. So
well, it's interesting because I in the mystical or shamanic energetic arts, it's a state of bilocalization. And I saw a gal recently connected with Brian Cunningham, who's in, I think, somewhere in Europe. And it's this concept of having the higher awareness or the higher intelligence while being here. And you said the word immersion, and you know, that's another, it seems like we're having all these synonyms for acceptance. And that's what I love about the humans first, because what's happening is we're all immersing back into our humanity, or as I always tell people, bringing the soul back into the body. And that very much then allows what you're talking about is this expanded awareness as a leader, the empathy, the caring, the active listening, because you have an easier time being bilocalized, being the higher self and the observer, what I call the observer and the participant. And, you know, it's very much where our consciousness as a whole is going, is this awareness that's also grounded here.
And so what you guys are getting me to think about, and it's ironic, you talk about, you know, the different languages or words of related back to acceptance. Isn't acceptance just connecting to your soul and also connecting to other souls, right? I mean, but we get disconnected from it, right? Because life, other people's lens of the world, our influencers get on top of that. And so we get connected back to love and to soul through acceptance. And so it's interesting, we talked last month a lot in on this platform, and also Humans First and others, a lot of talk about love, right? Valentine's Day. And now we're talking about acceptance, and there's like, they're like intertwined, interconnected, interwoven, right? Immersed in each other, right? And so the language of immersion, I think about how I explain how I've started this journey to do what I do now. And as I learned that I wanted to serve people, and I wanted to serve people through diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, I realized there's a lot of lenses I needed to understand better. And so what did I do? Well, what part of what I did is I immersed myself in volunteer board position on Latino nonprofits, leadership development nonprofits, Pan-Asian, to, it's like you talked about before in terms of exposure and experience, right? I could read on Google some of the topics and challenges and concerns of whatever demographic we want to talk about, right? But it's different if I'm in the arena with people and understanding, hey, we're trying to do this for our members and our communities and our sponsors, and trying to create better in that way. It's still a learning journey, right? But now I know better than I did before, because to Enrique's point, I've experienced it. So now my ability to serve is different. And so this notion of immersion is so important to acceptance, because understanding expands when we immerse ourselves, and we truly are open to, hey, what is my lens? What can I now see beyond my lens? How can I expand my perspective so that I can serve? We talked about servant leadership a little bit too. How can we, if we're servant leaders and we continue to look through our own lens, we have a limitation on the degree to which we can serve. If we have this acceptance where we're kind of connecting back to self, we're rooted and I know who I am, at that journey of getting clarity around that, And then we're going to experience and understanding the experience of human and how that's different for different people. What does that open up for us, right? In terms of putting humans first. If I'm only looking through my lens and focusing on putting humans first that way, I'm missing just a few people across the 7 billion people on the planet that way. But the more we get into this conversation, the more I hear, like me, expanding, right? There's a lot of things that are different, and we appreciate the differences and the uniqueness of each person. That's what makes us great as a society, as a people. But I think we often neglect the things we have in common from a humanity standpoint, and we sometimes let what we see get in the way of acceptance and possibility and love.
I had a teacher, actually, he helped build out Hay House Publishing. So former monk, Jewish guy, became a monk. And then he became a COO. And he once said, what we see blocks what we don't see. And, you know, and he has a similar Taoist perspective in the sense that the Taoist tradition is when you become no thing, capital T, no thing, you become everything. And this expansion that we're talking about, or acceptance, to put rooted in pragmatics from the esoteric, is an ongoing process. Literally, the universe is continuously expanding. So literally, in that sense, we are continuously accepting more and more of ourselves, more and more of our colleagues, more and more of our team, more and more of our communities. So it's, you know, for me, I always see what's happening up there is very much a reflection of what's happening down here.
Yeah, it's I was driving today. I actually was able to go and spend some time at the podcast today, PodFest, here going on here in Orlando. And as I was driving back to acceptance, right? As I was driving, there was a car that sped past me. Whoa. Right, and there's a local Christian radio station here, and they had that sticker on their car. Right. I said, well, you know, that's a Christian sticker. The guy is speeding down the street. I said, I wonder how much of that sticker he has actually accepted to be able to undo what that sticker really stands for and what he is actually showing, right? Because that's the difference between experience and exposure, right? Just because you've been exposed to the sticker and the contents of the sticker doesn't mean that it translates into your experience to support that which it stands for. And, you know, it's a simple reminder, but in leadership, right? So there's a lot of stickers we have on us, you know, leader of the year, you know, leader of the century, best mentor, all kinds of stickers. And we're just, you know, we use it as a laud, right? It is nice to be recognized for work that you have invested. I don't think there's anyone on earth that would say, no, that's okay. There's some that do, and it's weird, but right. So, but even then, that's their choice. You know, let them be. But there's so many stickers and few actions that support those stickers, and it goes back to the experience or exposure. We continue to put stickers on leaders that do not show the proof of an experience. And the longer we continue as organizations, as society, and as long as we keep slapping a nice sticker on the leader for, let's say, outdoing their team, you know, that's why sometimes it's funny because they say, you know, oh, the Academy Award goes to Enrique. I would like to thank all the people I had to step on to get to here. But, you know, it's just a simple reminder of that, hey, you know, the experience is really where you have shown that you accept yourself, and now you can actually accept others.
I love what you said about, don't slap stickers on yourself, and, titles do not define someone's worth. Titles do not validate if someone has got love. Going back to Hass's point, you mentioned about what we see. I do not want to misquote you. What we see, we are missing what we're not seeing. And
Yeah, Daniel Levine is the guy. So what we see blocks what we don't see.
What we don't see. And that's so important, right? I was speaking with a few people the other day, and we were talking about diversity. Let's approach things from a diversity lens. And some people were like, oh, we just don't want to talk about race and gender. But I was like, but that's such an important place to start from. Diversity, yes, diversity is not about race, ethnicity, not about age, not about gender, but it's more than that, right? It's about someone who's coming from Morocco, who is an engineer, who is a female, who is a Muslim, coming to the United States or going to the UK and saying, hey, this is my experience. This is what I have immersed in. How can I contribute the way I can contribute, where I can see the blind spots that you are missing to see, because you're exposed to a singular lens. Because the more eyes that we bring does not spoil the soup. In fact, more chefs will come and not criticize and taste, right? Everyone's palate is different. Someone might like sweet, someone might like salty, but they'll say, hey, this is good, but this is how we can tweak to your different audience. And going back to Enrique's point, a leader has got to be able to say, yes, we should cater the soup to this person. We should cater the soup to someone who has got allergies. We should cater to a person who is Jewish, who is Muslim, who is a Buddhist, because everyone who is diverse does not like cake. I like cake, but some people don't like cake. But the point is, being a leader, we should be able to even see the blind spots. We should not be saying, oh, you're an immigrant? Okay, this is the struggle that you're facing, so all immigrants go through that. No, some immigrants come with different lens. So that's an important piece to Enrique's and Hass's point. We should be able to consciously see that blind spot and say, I'm going to challenge this blind spot.
Yeah, I love that.
Mila.
Oh, sorry, Greg.
I was just going to say, I love that in terms of what came up for me is acceptance is not conformity, right? It doesn't mean I can accept, and it's not agreement necessarily. It's openness.
That's it.
And so that came up. And then before, the notion of getting back to Enrique's point about experience and exposure, it's the leader that has all the stickers and the notion of integrity and congruence. I've got all these stickers, mentor of the year, top producer, great, right? And we honor, there's a lot of work that goes in there, but if the actions don't support the recognition, and it becomes sort of like an incongruence there, that's going to be felt, and then the integrity kind of manifests into a culture, and that's something that's felt, and then that becomes part of what we see now in terms of it not feeling so good to be in an environment where you may be quote unquote successful, but not everybody feels successful.
It's interesting. Mila's point, it made me think that acceptance really brings the strength out of the team, of all the individuals. And it's true. And then, your point, Brian, got me thinking really quickly on this notion of the ego craves on recognition. And so much of my journey, the first book that I've kind of developed, and I have to get it out in form, is how I used to be a jerk and didn't know it, because I had been on this journey. I mean, my older brother is a celebrity doctor, and I was Tony Robbins. I mean, you name it, I did it. And it was recognition. It wasn't until I immersed, I got the experiences, and Enrique's drawn out, as I embodied that I was actually in that vibrational space, which Brian, you hit the nail on the proverbial head. People feel it. It's an exuding vibe. It radiates that this guy is all stickers, you know, and that's what I was. I was walking around, a lot of stickers, and, you know, I'm doing a lot of pro bono hours as a lawyer and all of this community service. And it was the incongruence because I hadn't, which for me is why I've had to learn to soften my approach and have more empathy as I've had more empathy for myself. The leaders have a hard time because there's so much neuroses, incrustation, distortions, you name it, layers of this cake. I love cake. I love anything sweet. And it's hard to actually embody and get through all of that and then take off the stickers because that's all people have lived with. And it's shocking.
I had shared with Brian. You know, it always brings a chuckle. You know, I make a differentiate successful with the K, and successful, right? And the K represents all those stickers, right? All the things that are bad about leaders is that K. When you say it, you don't realize that K is in there until you actually pronounce it successful. But most leadership run around successfully, and it becomes a silent K, the silent killer, if you will, which is that K. But it's all those stickers. It's all that K represents that they have not accepted themselves. But they have accepted everything that everybody else says about them, which is the bad part, because that becomes their truth and they live in it. Yeah.
I love that you brought that back into this conversation. When Enrique and I spoke earlier, he told me about success, and I just absolutely love that. We could talk about this topic probably for the entire day and not get exhausted of it, but I want to bring us to a close here, and we'll likely need to do another conversation follow on to build on this one, which that would be fantastic. So first of all, thank you all for this conversation. Mila, Hass, Enrique, wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you all for co-creating this. And what I'd like to do now is invite you all to kind of think of a learning, a takeaway, or something you'd like to leave the listeners with on this topic that impacts you and is meaningful to you. So let me start with Enrique.
Yeah, back to the core of the subject, which is acceptance, right? Acceptance is a painful thing. It is not easy, especially depending on how long you have accepted other people's truths about you, right? It will be a challenge to really come to that point, but you're not alone, and that's the key. The key is that you're not alone. Here we are, four individuals across the globe that have come to the same pinnacle in life of acceptance, different experiences to get there, but you're not alone, and we are willing to cheer you on and help you get over that piece, but it's possible. So if you're at that point where you think you're getting to, just go head on and we'll hold your hand.
Love that, Enrique. Thank you. Hass.
I would say, as far as the takeaway, the seminally what stands out for me is look for the wholeness, not for the holes, as Mila kind of said it. That's how I envisioned it. And for me, what that means is we're all one. You know, there is very much, we're all, through science, it's proven it. And when we look where our attention goes, our energy flows. So our focusing on our wholeness, our connection, and acceptance allows that. That's the openness to actually look for the holes, and not to the wholeness, not the holes, which is, you know, what I found a lot of the old paradigm was let's look at the divisiveness of what's separating us, our differences, and how we're defined or distinct or separate. And, you know, that wholeness is really what we're all coming back to, is coming back to that home.
Awesome.
That's all I have.
Hass. Mila.
Well, the takeaway that I would leave with would be acceptance is about digging deeper within yourself in order to move forward. If we are not willing to dig deeper into our hearts, into our minds, into our souls, I say souls, and our spirit, we will never be able to move forward in order to accept ourselves and accept others. So acceptance is about embracing, even when you are feeling insecure about yourself. It's about forgiving yourself in order to learn about others. Without forgiving yourself, accepting yourself, we will never be able to remove our own conscious discrimination against others, unconscious bias against others, and we will never be able to break that gate, open that gate to allow a space of safe, love, belonging, diversity, or even spirit. And I would say choose hardship and not poop shoot.
Wonderful, Mila. Thank you so much. To that, I would add, to Mila's point about going deeper, it's difficult to go deeper if you're not willing to go be vulnerable and explore things you may not like about yourself, or some things that may be difficult to explore. Like Enrique was saying, it's not easy, acceptance, right? It's difficult, but we've done our, to some point at this point, we've all engaged with it, and we continue to engage with it. But the fact that we've kind of had a growth journey on it, anybody can do that too. You can do that too. And so we encourage everybody to step into that vulnerability and to embrace, to use Mila's language, right? What comes up there, and the journey and the growth journey that you go on personally. The other thing that I will come back to, and it gets to what I talk about with what I do, is about helping people see differently. It gets directly to what we see blocks what we don't see. It gets directly to that. And people are like, oh, helping people see differently. Are you trying to manipulate people on giving them virtual reality goggles, or what's going on there? No, it's just about focusing on seeing beyond what you're currently able to see, so that with that expanded perspective, you can see differently, expansively, embrace more than you currently do, or get curious about more than you currently do to create better, right? Back to we can do better conversations. And so with that, we invite all of you listening to enrich and extend the conversation. Again, a celebration of Mila, Hass, and Enrique for this conversation. I thank you all very much. We invite you all to, in the comments below, share your experiences with acceptance, your journeys with it. Help enrich and extend the conversation. Invite others into it. We want to help others who may be struggling with this realize that they can step into this just as well. And we encourage you to jump into the vulnerability, embrace the process, reach out and for help and community around this. That's what we're trying to do too, is build community, so that people, because this journey of acceptance or just even working on yourself can be lonely. We want to help you feel a little less alone in the process, so that you can kind of realize the other side of acceptance, right? And what comes with greater acceptance is greater expansiveness and greater love and greater possibility for what could be for you and for how you serve. And so with that, we thank everybody. We look forward to having you on the next episode, and let's work on doing and creating better together. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you,
Thanks,
Hass.
Brian.
Thank you.